30 seconds.
Alright, mic check. Mic check, 1, 2. 1, 2, Civil Lance. Hey, Jerry, could you take the high end down a little more? I'm still getting some hiss out here.
Whoa, oh my god, what the f is that? Who the hell is that in the booth? What? Alright, you are fired. Whoever you are right now, get the hell out. Now, out. Okay, just get him out there, okay? We got a show to do. Here we go. 3, 2, 1.
Welcome, listeners, followers of Sing.net, all of you who play World of Warcraft. Here's Zivia! Thank you. Alright. Hey, we got a lot to talk about, so let's go ahead and kill the music now. Let's just cut it down. Alrighty, there we go. Okay, so, the first reply I received in terms of topics people would like to hear about was a very vague message from Vengeance4000 on YouTube that read, "Talk about BGs, that sounds fun." Now, Battlegrounds is a pretty broad topic, so that left me with quite a bit of room for decisions on what exactly people wanted to hear. So, let me offer you a consideration on why it is people feel that, no matter what side you play, your team is always losing. Now imagine, if you will, a ship has gone down, and there are now 10 survivors on a lifeboat. The nearest landmass is 3 days away, but there are only enough supplies on the lifeboat to support 7 people for 3 days. So 3 people have to jump overboard to a certain death so the other 7 can live. And if they don't, then everybody dies of starvation. Now this situation is an example of a social dilemma, which is much like a prisoner's dilemma, except on a scale greater than 2 players. Now if you don't know what a prisoner's dilemma is, by all means pause this and go do a little research. Seriously, I'll wait. Back? Okay, great. Now, the basic idea is that somebody is going to have to sacrifice for the group. So what if they're all strangers from different countries from different age groups who know absolutely nothing about each other? Odds are good that no one would be quick to volunteer themselves up to be one of the 3. But suppose there was some group they all belonged to. Members of the military, let's say, or longtime friends, or maybe even family. They all suddenly have a vested interest in the group doing well, and might give some real consideration to being one of the 3 unfortunate ones. The point you should take away here is that, faced with a social dilemma, people are more likely to cooperate with each other or give up personal things to benefit the group if they feel they strongly identify with the group. People want their sports teams to do well because they identify themselves as a fan, even though they have nothing to do with the team, except maybe being from the same city. People are willing to get in fights with each other over team loyalty, and people are very willing to die for family. Now, there are any number of reasons for this. In fact, it's a fairly large section of the study of game theory, but I'm keeping it simple for discussion's sake. So, let's say, instead of faced with life or death in a boat in the middle of nowhere, instead, you happen to be sitting in battlegrounds, and you're not part of a pre-made. As anyone who regularly PuGs can attest to, PuGs don't really work well together. The greatest frustration isn't even that they are being beaten, it's that so few people seem to truly be putting forth the effort required to win. They basically chase honor kills and ignore objectives. Well, has it always been that way? I mean, if you talk to any longtime players, they might tell you that PuGs seem to play better together back at 70. Or better together back at 60. Or better together back before Crossrealm Battlegrounds. Or better together before Battlegrounds whatsoever, when it was just raids on South Shore and Terran Mill. Now, true or not, here's some food for thought. Let's take a look at the factions in Vanilla WoW. Alliance had Paladins and Horde had Shamans, and never shall the twain meet in friendly terms. Horde were devoid of good-looking races, and, despite the story saying otherwise, were generally viewed as the evil races. Probably this was because in a lot of Warcraft history, orcs were the primary villain of the series, as were the undead. Alliance was generally viewed as the good or attractive races. And when leveling either faction, there were very clear-cut lines which quest hubs were Alliance and which were Horde. They had their own capital cities, their own starting zones, and almost everywhere you went, there was an Alliance town and a Horde town. And never the twain shall meet. The PvP titles were faction-specific, the battleground layouts were faction-specific, you were unable to change factions short of rerolling, and you couldn't roll cross-faction characters on a PvP server. In short, in vanilla WoW, the game was very, very divided between Alliance and Horde, and as a result, people were fairly loyal to playing one side or the other, to the point that they would often stereotype the other faction as sort of enemies. You know, Alliance are a bunch of little kiddies, or Horde are a bunch of teenage assholes, or, you know, fill in whatever you want there. But Burning Crusade rolls around. Now, both factions have access to all classes. There's a little bit of a wearing down of that line that separates Alliance and Horde. Most of the questing zones still share faction-specific hubs, and all the early zones offer some kind of objective to compete over, the towers, the graveyard, hola. However, now we're introduced to a faction-neutral capital. Everybody can hang out in Shatrath, and for the first time, people are regularly seeing the other faction in a non-violent manner. In addition, Horde now have Blood Elves. Now, say what you want, I happen to have spoken to a handful of people who claim they would only play Blood Elves if they played Horde because they didn't want to play evil or ugly. The great irony, of course, being that Blood Elves were arguably the most evil race on the Horde when the expansion first came out, but it meant that all the Legolas Night Elves were able to swap over to Horde to be the Sephiroth Blood Elves. Now, Wrath of the Lich King. The starting zones for Northrend have faction-specific hubs, but there's a general sense of shared quests as you progress. There are also no more outdoor PvP objectives, short of Wintergrasp, which is at best just another battleground. Now you can change factions for an admittedly very expensive fee, and you can roll characters of both factions on any server, regardless of PvP or PvE orientation. We have another neutral capital that is even more central to the continent than Shatrath was, in the form of Dalaran. And we don't even have the split factions of Scryers versus Aldor. Hell, you can walk right into the ally side bank as Horde, who cares? And down the line, we're expecting Alliance to finally get a bestial race in the form of Worgen, and the Alliance to finally... The Horde, sorry, my bad, to finally get a midget only played for comedy value in the form of goblins. And there was some speculation that there will be cross-faction communication available as everyone gets integrated with Battle.net. So what this all means is that there's been a definite trend away from dividing the factions and continually homogenizing the game. Supposedly, this has been in the interest of making it easier for friends to play together as more casual gamers show up, but it really destroys the sense of belonging to a group. Level an ally to 80 and level a horde to 80, and the experience truly doesn't feel all that different compared to how it used to. And as a result, people aren't going to care nearly as much if their team wins for any kind of faction pride. Go into any battleground now, and what do you see? People only care if the team wins, as far as it gets them more honor. No one is interested in giving up something to help the group because they're all out for themselves, because, hey, you don't know any of these people, f*** them. What do you mean for the horde? Nobody cares, go away. My advice? If you want a PvP, you better start finding your guilds and your pre-mades, because PuGs are only going to get worse as time goes on. So that's all for this week. For Sate.net, I'm Zevia, and I'll see you next week with a discussion on achievement farming with Psyche.